A single scar can hide 1,000 secrets, a truth waiting to shatter a lifetime of carefully woven lies. In this gripping tale, a young girl embarks on a quest for the truth, unearthing buried pasts and confronting betrayals that challenge everything she believed about herself. Subscribe now for more riveting stories that peel back the layers of mystery and reveal the power of truth. Jessica Fisher had always believed that her most defining characteristic was the scar that marred her face, a mark that, according to her parents, was the only remnant of a devastating house fire she had miraculously survived as a toddler. Growing up in the small, quiet town of Willow Creek, Jessica's scar was both a badge of survival and an endless source of torment. In school hallways, curious stares and cruel whispers followed her wherever she went. Bullies taunted her relentlessly, and even strangers on the street couldn't help but glance at the long, reddish mark as if it were an omen. At home, however, the narrative was different. Her father, James Fisher, a gentle man in his early 40s with kind eyes and a perpetual 5 o'clock stubble, would often tell her the heroic tale of survival over dinner. Her mother, Catherine, with her dark hair always pulled back neatly, lovingly maintained the household routine. They insisted that the scar was a symbol of resilience, a reminder of how fate had given her a second chance. Yet, as Jessica grew older, the burden of that visible reminder made her question why fate had chosen her to carry such a mark. One warm Saturday morning, as sunlight filtered through the living room curtains, Jessica curled up on the sofa engrossed in a text conversation with her best friend, Sophie. The soft tap of her fingertips on the phone blended with the gentle creak of the old furniture. James, occupied with repairing an aging cupboard door, would glance over occasionally, a tender smile on his face, admiring his daughter's determination. In contrast, Catherine's morning routine seemed less cheerful. She emerged from the kitchen carrying a stack of mail and the daily newspaper, a hint of worry lingering in her eyes. While Jessica's mind was busy scrolling through her social feed and recalling old memories, a small yet persistent seed of doubt began to grow within her. Was the story her parents had told her about the fire truly the whole truth? As the family's routine unfolded around her, Jessica couldn't help but wonder if her life had been shaped by a narrative carefully chosen to protect her, or perhaps to hide something far darker. That unspoken question would soon send ripples through the very fabric of her reality, setting her on a path from which there might be no return. Later that morning, Catherine settled at the coffee table, methodically sorting through the day's mail and the morning newspaper. Jessica's attention drifted from her phone to the rustle of paper and the soft murmur of her mother's voice. The familiar headlines and routine announcements suddenly took on a peculiar weight. Catherine's eyes kept flickering toward a certain page before she abruptly stiffened, her fingers trembling as she turned a few pages back. The ink on the paper seemed to bleed into her consciousness, stirring memories that she could not quite place. "What's wrong, Mom?" Jessica asked, her voice laced with concern. For a moment, Catherine hesitated, her gaze fixed on a photograph and an article buried within the newspaper. With a forced smile, she shrugged it off as just more bad news and continued with her morning ritual. Yet, even as she dismissed it out loud, the way her hands shook and the brief flash of terror in her eyes betrayed her inner turmoil. Jessica tried to focus on her own thoughts as she recalled the constant dermatologist appointments that she'd been forced to attend since childhood. The treatments, though promising slight improvements, never seemed to erase the scar completely. In a burst of frustration, she had half-jokingly suggested to her parents that perhaps cosmetic surgery might be the answer. Her father's face had softened in dismay, while her mother's eyes had darkened with an emotion Jessica couldn't decipher at the time: fear, regret, or perhaps sorrow. That day, as Catherine continued to fidget with the newspaper, Jessica's mind reeled with questions. Why was her mother so visibly disturbed by a mere article? Was it about the story of the missing girl featured in the community section? The image on the page, an almost eerily familiar face, triggered an unsettling feeling. Jessica tried to push the thought aside, convinced that it was nothing more than an overactive imagination. But deep inside, she sensed that the truth about her own scar was more complex than the simple tale of a house fire. Before the day's events could take a darker turn, the family continued their morning routine. Jessica, still clutching her phone, reluctantly acknowledged her upcoming dermatologist appointment when her mother reminded her of the date. Though her parents' voices were gentle and assuring, the silent storm of questions brewing inside her would soon burst forth, forever changing the narrative of her life. Jessica's routine seemed unchanging, each day a repetition of the last, until a simple visit to the dermatologist's clinic began to unravel the carefully spun fabric of her identity. In the cool, sterile waiting room of the clinic, she sat quietly with her eyes drifting over the latest issue of a local newspaper. Amid the mundane chatter and the occasional hum of the air conditioner, her eyes caught sight of an article that sent a shiver down her spine. The headline read, "Missing Orphan. Jenny Clark vanished from orphanage 10 years ago." Below the headline, a grainy photograph of a young girl with striking features stared back at her. In that moment, Jessica's heart pounded erratically. There was an uncanny resemblance, the same determined eyes, a similar expression of melancholy, and most disturbingly, a facial mark not unlike her own scar. Jessica's mind raced. Could it be possible that the story of the fire was a fabrication? Had her life been built on a lie? Before she could dwell on the implications, Dr. Smith, a kindly but reserved man, called her name. With a quick glance at the article, Jessica slipped the paper into her bag and followed him into the examination room. The sterile light overhead seemed to emphasize the lines on her face, the very evidence of the life-altering incident she'd always believed to be a simple accident. During the examination, unable to hold back her turmoil any longer, Jessica hesitated before asking the question that had been gnawing at her for years. "Dr. Smith, if I really survived a terrible fire, why is the scar only on my face? Shouldn't there be other marks?" Dr. Smith paused, his expression thoughtful. "Jessica, I can only speak with the information I've been given," he replied cautiously. "Your parents told me it was a fire, and that is all I know." Yet, his measured tone did little to ease the storm inside her. As she left the clinic, Jessica's thoughts remained clouded with doubt. She clutched the small article tightly in her bag, determined to find out more, even if it meant challenging everything she'd ever known about herself. The ride home was a blur. As the bus rumbled along the familiar route, the passing scenery transformed into a montage of childhood memories and unanswered questions. Jessica's mind played over the photo of the missing girl again and again. That day, the whispers of doubt had grown louder, threatening to shatter the carefully maintained story of survival that had defined her entire existence. That evening at home, the atmosphere in the Fisher household was thick with unspoken tension. Dinner was a quiet affair, punctuated only by the clinking of cutlery and occasional glances exchanged between her parents. The remnants of the day's conversation, the unanswered questions, the unsettling article, hovered in the background like an ominous specter. Unable to contain her inner turmoil any longer, Jessica finally confronted her parents. "Mom, Dad, I need to know the truth," she demanded, her voice trembling with both anger and desperation. "If I survived a fire, why is the scar only on my face? And why does that missing persons article look so familiar?" Her words hung in the air, charged with emotion. James, who had been quietly finishing up his repair work in the kitchen, paused and set down his tools. His eyes, filled with sorrow and a hint of resignation, met hers. "Jessica," he began softly, "there's something we haven't told you." Catherine's face turned ashen as she looked away, as if trying to escape the painful truth. For a long moment, the only sound was the steady tick of the clock on the wall. Finally, Catherine cleared her throat. "We were trying to protect you," she said, her voice wavering. "There are some things about your past, about where you really came from, that are too difficult to explain." But Jessica was not satisfied with vague reassurances. "Protect me from what?" she demanded, her voice rising with every word. "I deserve to know who I really am." Her father's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "We always meant to tell you when you were old enough," he said, his tone heavy with regret. "But we feared that knowing the truth would only bring you pain." That night, as Jessica lay awake in her dimly lit room, the whispers of a hidden past echoed relentlessly in her mind. Every memory, every scar, every lingering doubt began to form a picture of a life not wholly her own, a life built on secrets and half-truths. The confrontation had cracked the facade that had protected her, leaving behind a raw, aching vulnerability that demanded answers. And with that, the path to her true identity and the dark secret that lay buried in her past was set in motion. Unable to shake the nagging feeling that everything was not as it seemed, Jessica began to gather fragments of clues wherever she could. Late that night, in the secrecy of her room, she retrieved the small, crumpled article she had hidden away in her bag. The headline and the haunting image of Jenny Clark refused to leave her thoughts. The similarities between Jenny's picture and her own features were too striking to be dismissed as mere coincidence. Her heart pounded as she debated her next move. Finally, driven by a mixture of desperation and courage, Jessica decided to take a leap of faith. With trembling fingers, she typed out a message to the number listed at the bottom of the article. "I think I might be Jenny Clark. Please, call me," she wrote, her mind racing with possibilities. In that single moment, she crossed a line, one that might forever alter the course of her life. No sooner had she pressed send than a wave of regret crashed over her. Doubts clouded her mind. What if this was a terrible mistake? What if the person on the other end would not help her, but instead bring even more pain? The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Yet, as the hours passed, a reply finally arrived. The message was brief but laced with urgency. A woman named Sarah, who identified herself as Jenny's older sister, wrote back with words of sorrow and hope. Sarah explained that she had been searching for answers ever since Jenny had vanished from the orphanage all those years ago. The conversation that unfolded over the following hour was intense and emotional. Jessica's heart ached as she listened to Sarah recount details about Jenny's life. Details that resonated deeply with memories that Jessica had never before questioned. Sarah's voice, as described in her texts, was gentle but carried the weight of a lifetime of loss and longing. Each word confirmed what Jessica had begun to suspect, that her entire past might be a carefully constructed illusion meant to shield her from a painful truth. By the time the conversation ended, Jessica was left with a mixture of hope and dread. The message had opened a door, one that led not only to the possibility of reclaiming her true identity, but also to a confrontation with secrets that her parents had worked so hard to bury. In that silent moment, Jessica realized that the quest for truth was just beginning, and that the answers might come at a great cost. The next morning, the household atmosphere was palpably different. Jessica's parents appeared more somber than usual, their expressions etched with worry and guilt. At breakfast, Catherine's hand trembled slightly as she poured juice into a glass, and James avoided making eye contact with their daughter. Jessica could sense that something was terribly wrong. As the family sat around the table, small details, the way Catherine's eyes darted to the corner of Jessica's backpack, the lingering silence after a casual comment, spoke volumes. Unable to ignore the unsettling tension any longer, Jessica gently confronted her mother. "Mom, where did you get that paper?" she asked, pointing at the corner of her bag that peeked out with a fragment of the article. Catherine's face paled, and for a moment, she seemed lost for words. "It's nothing, honey," she replied softly, but her tone carried a note of panic that Jessica could not miss. James interjected with a placating remark. "We're just trying to protect you, Jessica. There are things in this world, things you're not ready for yet." But Jessica was not convinced. "Not ready for what?" she demanded, her voice rising with indignation. "I deserve to know who I am and where I came from." Her words hung heavily in the air as her parents exchanged a brief, sorrowful glance. Catherine's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and James' shoulders sagged in defeat. That day, as Jessica retreated to her room, she found herself torn between a desire for the security of the known and the irresistible pull of truth. Every minute alone was filled with the echo of Sarah's words and the fragments of a story that refused to remain buried. The revelation that she might actually be Jenny Clark, the missing orphan, was both liberating and terrifying. With her heart pounding, Jessica made a silent vow. She would uncover the secrets of her past no matter how painful they might be. And in that moment, every seemingly ordinary day took on a new meaning, a fragile hope that the truth would set her free from the chains of a fabricated life. In the days that followed, Jessica's newfound determination led her to scour old family albums, hidden letters, and even the locked drawers of her parents' desk. Each new discovery only deepened the mystery. She found faded photographs of a smiling little girl with the same distinct scar, tucked away in an old scrapbook. In one such photo, the girl's eyes shone with a mix of innocence and defiance, a stark contrast to the resigned expression that her parents had always described. Late one evening, while her parents were asleep, Jessica carefully retrieved a set of old letters from a hidden compartment in her dresser. The faded handwriting and cryptic references hinted at a past filled with pain, abandonment, and secrets. The letters spoke of an orphanage, of a girl named Jenny, and of a fire that had taken more than just physical marks. It had burned away the truth. Each word intensified the burning question in her mind. If her scar was not the result of a mere accident, then what dark event had truly defined her existence? Unable to contain her turmoil, Jessica reached for her phone and sent another cautious message to Sarah, asking for more details about Jenny's history. The response came swiftly. Sarah revealed that she had long suspected that the story told by the Fisher family was a cover-up for something far more sinister. According to Sarah, there were hints in old records and even whispers among those who had known Jenny in the orphanage. The truth, Sarah believed, had been deliberately obscured to protect Jessica, but at what cost? That night, as Jessica lay in bed with the storm of emotions raging inside her, she felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. Every revelation was a step closer to reclaiming her true identity, but it also meant shattering the comforting illusions that had defined her childhood. The danger of confronting the past was real, yet Jessica could not turn back. The secrets of her life were calling out to her, and she knew that, soon, she would have to face the consequences of uncovering them. It was on a chilly autumn evening that the hidden truths began to unravel in ways Jessica had never anticipated. After a long day of piecing together clues and talking to Sarah, Jessica decided she needed a break. With a heavy heart and a mind buzzing with unanswered questions, she announced to her parents that she would visit her best friend Sophie's house, a refuge from the storm of her thoughts. But as she climbed into the family car, an unsettling feeling gnawed at her. The route they took was unfamiliar, the turns strangely circuitous. Confused and alarmed, Jessica tried to speak up, but before she could, a strange drowsiness took over her senses. The world outside the window blurred into a hazy dream as the car slowed, then stopped in a deserted part of town. The last thing she remembered was a fleeting glimpse of the setting sun and the faint whisper of voices, her parents' voices, melding with a sound that resembled the chime of an old clock. Darkness swallowed her whole, and Jessica drifted into an unnatural sleep that seemed to stretch on forever. When she finally awoke, Jessica found herself in a small, cramped room that smelled faintly of antiseptic and fear. Her head throbbed, and her vision was blurry. It took her several agonizing minutes to piece together that she was no longer in the familiar warmth of home. Catherine sat in the corner, her eyes red from crying, while James hovered near the door with an expression of anguished regret. "Jessica, I'm so sorry," James murmured, reaching out to comfort her as if to say that everything would be all right. But Jessica could sense that something was deeply amiss. Her heart pounded as she struggled to recall the events that had led her here. Had she been taken? Was this part of the secret her parents had tried so hard to hide? In that disorienting moment, the stark truth began to crystallize. Her parents' expressions were a mix of remorse and determination, an internal conflict that hinted at a betrayal far deeper than she could imagine. As Jessica's mind cleared, the faint sound of a door creaking open sent a shiver down her spine. There, on the threshold, stood a figure shrouded in shadow, watching her with eyes that held both sorrow and something else, an unspoken plea for forgiveness, or perhaps a desperate warning of what was to come. In the tense silence that followed, Catherine could no longer keep the secrets locked away. With tears streaming down her face, she confessed the painful truth. "Jessica, we never meant to hurt you," she sobbed, her voice barely audible. "You are not who you think you are. You were not born of our love, but were found abandoned after that terrible fire at the orphanage." Jessica's heart shattered as the words sank in. The carefully crafted story of survival, the legacy of a miraculous escape from a raging fire, was nothing more than a fabrication meant to spare her the harsh reality. "Who am I then?" she whispered, feeling as if the ground beneath her was crumbling away. Her father's eyes filled with regret as he added, "We did what we thought was best. We took you in, gave you a home, and tried to shield you from the painful truth. The scar, it wasn't from a fire, Jessica. It was from an accident. A terrible mistake we made in our desperate attempt to cover up our own dark secret. The revelation was like a tidal wave crashing over her. Every memory, every whispered lie, suddenly lost its meaning. Jessica, whose entire life had been defined by the mark on her face, now realized that her identity was based on lies. The missing girl, Jenny Clark, was not a mere coincidence, but a key to unlocking the mystery of her own past. With trembling hands, she clutched the old letters and photographs, pieces of a puzzle that had long been hidden. As Catherine continued to speak in halting, broken sentences, Jessica felt a mix of betrayal, grief, and a strange, budding resolve. The life she had known was built on secrets, and the darkness behind that facade was far deeper than she had ever imagined. "I need to know everything," she declared, her voice steady despite the torrent of emotions. "I want to understand who I truly am." In that fraught moment, the old narratives shattered completely, leaving behind an uncharted future. Jessica's mind raced with questions. What had really happened at the orphanage? Why had her parents chosen to hide the truth for so long? And most of all, who was Jenny Clark? And how did she fit into the story of the scar? In the days that followed, Jessica's world felt like a maze of half-truths and buried secrets. Despite the overwhelming pain of betrayal, a fierce determination began to take root inside her. If her past had been hidden away and distorted, then she would reclaim it piece by piece. Embracing the persona of Jessica Fisher while slowly shedding the weight of falsehood, she embarked on a quest for the truth. Every night, in the quiet hours when the house was dark, Jessica pored over old photographs, letters, and even personal journals that she'd secretly discovered. Each page, each faded note, was a step closer to understanding her real origins. With a renewed sense of purpose, she made contact with Sarah once more. Their conversations deepened, and Sarah shared details about the orphanage where Jenny had once lived, the struggles, the friendships, the whispers of a mysterious fire that had destroyed so much more than just a building. At the same time, Jessica began to test the boundaries of the small world she had always known. She carefully observed her parents' behavior, noting moments when they exchanged furtive glances or hastily changed the subject. Every little detail was a clue, and she recorded them in a secret journal hidden under her mattress. One crisp evening, while her parents slept soundly in their room, Jessica quietly gathered her notes and took one last look at the family photographs on the wall. Each image now felt like a relic of a past that was not entirely hers, a life constructed by well-meaning lies. Determined to break free, she made a bold decision. She would contact the authorities anonymously with the evidence she had collected. Perhaps the truth could not be buried any longer. That night, with trembling hands and a resolute heart, Jessica left a carefully compiled dossier of evidence in an envelope at the local police station. It was a risky move, but she knew that exposing the hidden past was the only way to set herself free. With the first tentative steps of her escape plan set in motion, Jessica felt both the thrill of newfound independence and the looming uncertainty of what would come next. Every moment was charged with possibility and danger. The following morning, as the golden light of dawn crept over Willow Creek, a cacophony of sirens shattered the fragile calm of the Fisher household. Jessica was startled awake by the urgent commotion outside. Through the window, she saw flashing blue and red lights as police cars pulled up in a neat formation around the house. Fear mingled with a sliver of hope in her chest. This might be the moment of reckoning. Before she could fully process the unfolding scene, Catherine and James were forcibly led away in handcuffs. Their faces, once etched with sorrow, now wore expressions of panic and regret. The local authorities quickly moved in, swabbing and collecting evidence from every corner of the house, including the hidden compartments that Jessica had painstakingly uncovered. In the midst of the chaos, Sarah appeared, a beacon of compassion and strength. She rushed to Jessica's side, embracing her tightly and promising that everything would soon be revealed. At the police station, Jessica was taken to a quiet interview room. The officers, kind but methodical, began to question her. With steady resolve, she recounted every detail, from the message she had sent to Sarah to the secret letters and photographs that spoke of a forgotten past. Her voice, though trembling at first, grew stronger as she spoke of the betrayal, the hidden origins, and the true story behind the scar. It was then that the authorities made a breakthrough. DNA tests confirmed what Jessica had long suspected. She was not Jessica Fisher at all. Her real identity was Jenny Clark, the missing girl from the orphanage whose fate had been shrouded in mystery for over a decade. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community and shattered the final remnants of the carefully constructed lie. For the first time in her life, Jenny, once known as Jessica, felt the weight of the truth lift from her shoulders. The burden of a fabricated past, of secrets and betrayals, was replaced by the painful but liberating reality of her origins. As she sat in that stark interview room, surrounded by officers and the distant hum of police radios, Jenny's heart swelled with both sorrow for the years lost and hope for the future that lay ahead. In the weeks that followed the dramatic arrest of her adoptive parents, Jenny's life underwent a transformation unlike any she had ever known. Now living with Sarah, the sister who had reached out to her with unwavering love, Jenny began the long, winding journey of healing and self-discovery. The old Fisher household, once a fortress of secrets, was replaced by a humble apartment filled with warmth and a promise of new beginnings. Jenny spent many long hours with Sarah, sorting through old records, family trees, and personal mementos that painted a picture of the life she might have had. With each piece of evidence, she learned more about the orphanage, about the tragedy that had befallen the real Jenny Clark, and about the courage it took to survive in a world that had tried to erase her existence. The scar on her face, once a symbol of shame and mystery, gradually became a testament to her resilience. No longer a mark of a manufactured past, it was now a badge of honor, an indelible reminder of how far she had come. As Jenny rebuilt her identity, she discovered a community of kindred souls who had their own stories of loss and redemption. With the support of therapists, friends, and new mentors, she learned to see beauty in her imperfections and strength in her scars. Jenny began to share her story at community gatherings, hoping that her painful journey could light a path for others struggling with their own hidden truths. In a stirring final chapter of her tumultuous life, Jenny organized a public memorial for the real Jenny Clark, an event that celebrated survival, resilience, and the right to know one's true self. Surrounded by supporters and survivors, she spoke with raw honesty about the years of deception, the moment of revelation, and the incredible power of truth. Her words resonated deeply with everyone present, forging a connection that transcended pain and built bridges of understanding. And so, as the sun set on a day filled with healing and hope, Jenny Clark stepped into the future as her own person, free from the shackles of a lie, emboldened by the truth, and ready to write the next chapter of her life. The scars on her face no longer defined her. They were simply part of the tapestry of a life reimagined, a story reborn. In that new dawn, Jenny embraced her identity fully, confident that the journey toward redemption was not an end but a beginning, a promise of a life built on truth, love, and the courage to face even the darkest secrets. Years later, Jenny would look back on that tumultuous period with a mixture of pain and gratitude. The journey from Jessica Fisher to Jenny Clark was a testament to the human spirit's capacity to overcome betrayal and rebuild itself. In the quiet moments of reflection, she often thought of the fear and uncertainty that had once gripped her, and how that fear had transformed into the unyielding resolve to live authentically. Jenny's story had become a beacon of hope for many. She established a foundation dedicated to helping those who felt trapped by the lies of their past, providing them with the support and resources needed to uncover their true identities. In sharing her experiences, Jenny discovered that the act of revealing painful truths could also be a powerful act of healing, both for herself and for others who had long lived in the shadows of secrets. Standing before a new generation of survivors at one of her foundation's events, Jenny would often say, "Our scars are not symbols of defeat, but of the battles we have fought and the strength we've gained. Every secret uncovered, every truth embraced, is a step toward a brighter, more honest tomorrow." And in that moment, as her audience listened with rapt attention, Jenny knew that the painful chapters of her past had given birth to a future filled with promise and endless possibility. Thank you for watching our story unfold. If you enjoyed this journey of truth and redemption, please give us a like, subscribe for more heartfelt stories, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support means the world to us.